Paul Felder was doing an interview and he was talking about Kamaru Usman and what it's going to take to beat him. And Paul had laid out it's going to take a dominant wrestler, just by example. The guy's got to be big and the guy's got to be strong. Now, I don't disagree. I just haven't seen any evidence within Kamaru Usman's career that if you put him on his back, he's got a big problem. I was thinking about Colby Covington last night, and that same thing is true. Like, since they've set that octagon up in 1993, there are not very many beliefs. There are not many absolutes that we had as an ideal or in practice since 1993 that still exists today in 2022. I can only think of one, which is if you get on top of a guy and you keep him there, good things are going to happen. Like, that is one thing from the first time they set that octagon up until today. The guy that can get top of the other guy and keep him there, good things are going to happen for him. They more times than not are going to raise his hand. And the reason I bring that to Colby Covington, I've never seen anybody take Colby down and then have to see what Colby could do on bottom. I can remember a scramble where Masvidal, by example, got on top of Colby, what we would call control time in the sport of wrestling. And Colby handled it like a college wrestler, which is he came to his knees and then his feet. Whereas at MMA would say you go to your knees and then you go to your back. Like, that's a belief within MMA. That is not a belief within the wrestling community. You go down, you go to your knees within the wrestling community. You get up to your feet and you turn and face them. Only point being, I haven't seen anybody do that to Colby. And you would think if you had a great wrestler in there and you follow the same procedure that we have studied since 1993 till today, that would be the way to beat Covington. But we did that to Covington. We stuck him in there with a great wrestler known as a national champion, known as Kamaru Usman. It just didn't happen. So it's very hard for me to disagree with Paul Felder. Like, the one thing that Paul is like, if a guy's going into a fight and you go, well, go punch him in the face really hard. It's like, okay, you're right. That does seem to be really true. And while I don't disagree with Paul Felder, as I do look at the roster, who do you got? Who do you got that's this dominant wrestler that can get on top of people and just keep them there? And I think all of our minds go to the same place, which is likely where Felder's mind went, which is Chimaev. And it's very interesting if you study the history of the sport. You will hear of people who back at the turn of the century went 11 years unbeaten in boxing, or a guy that was a champion for 15 years in boxing. He went 100 rounds without losing. You'll hear of these stories. You won't have evidence, though. You won't be able to talk to somebody, even if it's your great ancestor who was actually there and witnessed this. You won't have any video of it. Why? They're tied in. It's not that people were better some time ago. It's the relevance to tape and footage, which is the problem in beating Kamaru Usman. If you go and you study the last 10 Kamaru Usman fights, just as a round number off the top of your head, you're going to come to different conclusions. If you think that he's a ground and pound guy, okay, great, go see the Tyron Woodley fight. It looks as though you're right. But then if you go and talk to Gilbert Burns and you find out how good Kamaru Usman's hands are, or you talk to George Masvidal, who got to feel them both, the punches, the kicks, and the grappling, which made for a more complete MMA fighter, it's a very different guy. That's not just a compliment to Kamaru Usman. That's very problematic for the opponents. If you're going to beat somebody, you first have to go and get a whole pile of data together. I've brought you guys this example before as it pertains to the Bullet. But if you go and you get all of her fights together and you find all the rounds that you're not going to find fights she lost. So then you start searching for rounds that she lost. You're not going to get more than one of those. So then you start looking for moments. You start to look for a sequence. You start to look for tendencies. You start to look for habits. I mean, looking for tendencies and habits, these are the words of a very desperate person, but you have to start somewhere. Then you go get a collection of these fights together and you got some really good notes, and then you got 3 or 4 other people in between you and these next guys. You all take your best shot. One of you are going to crack the code and the belt turns over. That is the sport as it is as you see it. But all sports are true when it pertains to footage, which is why it's problematic to beat Kamaru Usman, because he's getting better. He's getting better, he's adapting, and he's changing. And we can even put our finger on some stuff that he's done. It's never a great habit to get the same result to go and do something different. It's just not a great habit. Boxers are more guilty than MMA, but as soon as you get beat, you throw everything out and you blame the team around you. It's extremely common in boxing. We see it in MMA, but more so about you get beat, you have a whole new team. You're now going to do your training camp in a whole new location for your next fight. Just one of these things. Kamaru Usman, who was the champion of the world, left where his head coach was. where his head training, his head workout partners were. He went from Florida, he goes out to Colorado. Now, his next fight is going to be a major tell. Real simple. This is pass or fail. Do you look better or do you look worse? He could still win. He could still have the desired outcome. That's not what the litmus test here. Do you look better or do you look worse? Well, he looked better and he looked different. That's the answer. All of a sudden, you got Kamaru Usman with this incredible jab. All of a sudden, you got Kamaru Usman with his chin barrier that very hard to find and get him back. So if you go and study tape, great. You're at square one with Kamaru Usman. I give you that diatribe because that's where you're at with Chimaev. This is a big problem beating Chimaev right now. You don't have a lot of footage to turn to. You could go and watch every fight that he's ever had that's been televised. That's going to take you the same 5 minutes that everybody else. That's not much time. You watch his walkout in his interviews, you haven't killed a half hour. You watch every fight in every sequence and rewind. Before he throws a jab, what is the first thing he does? Before he throws the cross, which way does he lean? I mean, these are tendencies that everybody wants to look for. Before he shoots a double leg, what did he do? If you go look at Chimaev's very last fight, he walked across the ring and he shot a double. He had no setup whatsoever. He had no tell. He had no gimmick. He doesn't hit you with this foot first. He doesn't blink before he does it. He walked right across and he grabs you with a double. The second that you're within arm's reach, it's very problematic. You've got to deal with it. Everybody has to deal with this. I remember back in my amateur days having a fight, and I swear I will never fight a guy that I don't see footage of. Now, there's no way for me to control that. I didn't have enough power back then. I was desperate to get fights, but I do remember when a fight concluded, I had made myself this vow, of which I did not keep, because I had no ability to. I just understood how important it was. This is a rule right now in Oregon. This might be a national rule. I don't follow football that close, but I will tell you it for sure is a statewide rule. In football, you cannot watch video of your opponent. So you could go sit in the audience, and I'm talking about little kids. I'm talking about 5th grade, 6th grade, this rule enacts. You can go and make a video. You cannot then go back and watch the tape as a way of preparing to beat them. That's weird for me. I don't understand football well. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to watch them. I don't know why a tape would exist if it wasn't to be broken down and studied, but it is a rule. And if you do that as a coach, they will take your coach, which is a volunteer job to start with. You're not paid. You'll still be fired. You're absolutely not allowed to do it because of the sport of football says if they know what our plays do and we only got 3 or 4 that work and that they start to understand what our signals are and our hand gestures are, they're going to stop the game. So everybody goes, yeah, that's true. It's not going to work. Let's just all throw it out as a way to level the playing field. That's an extreme example in my sense. It is. But in fighting, it's very true as well. If you don't have a lot of footage of a guy or moreover, it's his first time and it's brand new, it's very tough. You go watch a collection of Kamaru Usman fights, you're only going to come to one conclusion, which is he keeps getting better. Well, how do you tell your pupil that when you're getting ready to fight him? Okay, the guy's a national champion wrestler, and for the first 10 fights in his career, he took everybody down, and he took them down in absolutely every round. But fights 11 through 15, he quit taking people down. He started breaking their nose with his hands. It's like, it's really tough. What do you tell a guy? What do you tell him? You ended up in that same juxtaposition as it obtains to Chimaev. Chimaev's had 4 fights, takes everybody down, well, except for one guy, which he never even tried to take down, but he knocked him out on his feet. And then you get these different reports. You, of course, have to go to that. You, of course, have to go by reputation. What does Alexander Gustafsson say? Chael Sonnen went and watched Chimaev work out. What does he have to say? Sean Strickland spars with him every day. Can I get Sean on the phone and get some inside scoop? It just becomes a big problem. Am I worried about the guy's wrestling? Am I worried about the guy's striking? Because from the beginning of time, it generally is one or the other. It's still this big question up in the air that somebody always throws you off on. Right when you think wrestling earns the day, you get introduced to a guy named Israel Adesanya who's never had a match. Right when you think jiu-jitsu rules the world, you go and run into a guy named Israel Adesanya who does not have a purple belt, a brown belt, or a black belt. He's got a gold belt, right? There's always somebody that throws you off. And when I do look at Paul Felder, who is saying if you're going to get the best of Kamaru Usman, you've got to take him down and keep him there. I'm changing Paul's words, but yeah, I think that Paul's right. It seems like that recipe would beat anybody if you can take them down and keep them there against their will. Whether you were passing, whether you were pounding, whether you're positioning, you're still gaining favor with the judges. I think that's true. But if you look a little closer at the division, you're going to be confronted with the next question, which is who amongst them has the ability to do that?